Hello and good evening to all of you. Thanks in Distance Ed for waiting for us. I mean, organizing this group is a little bit difficult, so you'll understand once you hear from them a little bit later on. But we're all set to go, and glad that you are joining us tonight, and those folks in the audience out here. You are in for a treat. I told Diane Harwell and Lynn Harrell as I left the office today, I had no idea what this was going to be like tonight, but I knew I was going to have a good time. So it was. I hope that you will enjoy meeting these distinguished superintendents and enjoy hearing about their experiences, and hopefully we'll learn a great deal about them and about the work that you're involved with. So without further ado, Brooke, if you'll give us a broader shot, I want to show you this handsome group. Beside me is TEC Dowling, who is currently interim superintendent in Lexington Richland 5. And beside him is Dr. Billy Floyd, former superintendent in several places, which he'll tell you about, and currently serving as executive director of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, the South Carolina group. And so we're going to do that one. And then Dr. Walt Tobin, who is currently serving as interim superintendent in Newberry. So the first thing that I want them to do is to tell you just a little bit about themselves and their career, sort of where they've been and where they're going and what they're doing, and a little bit of all about them. And so we're going to start with TEC, and so just introduce yourself to this group and talk a little bit about the kinds of things you've done in ed admin and school administration, and anything else you think that will be all right.
Leave out some stuff.
Well, thank you, Sandy. And really, I was going to defer to the elder statesman, Walter Tobin, here tonight, because, when you get as old as Walter is, he can't remember everything for long periods of time, so I was going to give him a chance to go first. Do you mind, Walt?
I'm good.
Okay.
And these are my friends, too. My name is Walter Tobin. I started my career as a teacher in Denmark in 1964, so that tells you that I've been doing this a long time. I have served as a teacher, a coach, a guidance counselor, assistant principal, a principal, coached at both basketball and football. I worked at the Department of Education. I worked at the Department of Education during the days when accreditation was the heart of everything that was done in the Department of Education. It was accreditation, and we determined whether schools were their accreditation and their rankings and that kind of thing. That's a whole different process now. They've actually put those folks out of the building, so you can tell how archaic that is. But it's still an important piece. I taught and worked in Denmark for about 15 years and thought that might be where I would always be, and had an opportunity to come to the Department of Education, which was a real milestone in my career, in the sense that it gave me a statewide perspective. And TEC has done that. Bill has done some of that, but gives you an idea of what's going on across the state. And there's a different flavor. School districts are more alike than they are different, but they have some idiosyncrasies about them. And it was an opportunity to see people operating from a different level. I served in accreditation for about 4 years, and Dr. Charlie Williams gave me an opportunity to serve as Director of State Adult Education. Now, I'm going to regress just a bit. As you move into your careers, as you move along, and sometimes you will be given opportunities that you think that are dead end, or not something that you're very interested in doing. But sometimes when you do those small things down the road, it has an impact on what you might do later on. Dr. Williams called me up to his office and said, "Have you ever done any work in adult education?" Well, I had served as a part-time director while I was serving as at one time as high school principal, adult education director, athletic director, and one year they asked me to coach basketball until they found somebody. And so back in the old days, that's what you did. You don't believe that, but that's the real truth. Dr. Wiz asked me, had I ever done any work in adult education? And he was about to make a change, and there was a retirement taking place, and he wanted a better handle on that, I think. And I had done as a part-time director. I remember seeing some cars, Billy, when I used to go from football practice home, and I'd see these cars out in front of the building, and I wondered what those folks did at night. Well, I soon found out that as a part-time director. But I did that, and because I had that experience, he could legitimately appoint me as Director of Adult Education. And so I did that for 6 years. And very pleased by what took place, and during that time had an opportunity to make an impact. The Nation at Risk report came out. Some of you may remember that. It talked about the the illiteracy rate and what high schools were doing with students and the dropout, et cetera, et cetera. And Dr. Williams became very interested in adult education at that time, in adult literacy. We did some work in the workplace, established programs all over the state, put some in the workplace and that kind of thing. So I was 45 years old, and I decided that at some time, I think that most people in this business would like someday to be a superintendent, and maybe some of you have that aspiration. And I said, what should I do is before I turned 50, I was 45, what I need to do is to apply for superintendency. And I applied at Lexington School District 4. Had no idea that I would get the job, but I simply wanted to know what the questions were people asking. What do they want to know? What do they want to know from people? What do they expect from you? And I remember going down one Sunday afternoon after being given an opportunity to apply and to interview before that group. It was a Sunday afternoon. And I sat there and started to talk to those folks, and I saw a lady who had the brightest red hair I'd ever seen, and she started to shake her head like that, and so I got real comfortable, So I sat back and told them what I knew, which was very little. About 3 or 4 days later, they called me and said, "You're one of two." I said, "One or two what?" And I remember very distinctly being so nervous. I had change in my pocket, and I couldn't stop rattling that change. But they gave me an opportunity, and I'll end with this, to serve as superintendent in Lexington School District 4. If I look back on my career, I spent 2.5 years there. If I thought maybe that the greatest impact, and I'm not trying to be braggadocious in any way. I'm simply saying that I thought that was the place, if I look back on it, had the greatest impact. And those folks gave me an opportunity, took a chance on a fellow who had never had any experience at all at that level, and gave him an opportunity to serve as superintendent. It turned out to be a great experience for me and for them, I think. And I had an opportunity to move on and serve as superintendent in Orangeburg and retired in Orangeburg in about 5.5 years ago.
These folks know you because of Leonard Pellissier's book. Walt Tobin is one of the folks quoted and talked about in that book, and we did, Caring Enough to Lead, earlier in the session. And several of these folks have written to say, I know Dr. Tobin, and so they've had an introduction to you through Len Pellissier's book, and so we very much appreciate you being here and giving that perspective. Bill, are you going next?
What Walt left off was that not only did he do all of that, but he has served also as an interim superintendent in about 3 different districts. Walt, Calhoun, Fairfield.
I think it's 4.
4?
4, yeah.
And,
I can't keep a job.
But quite a distinguished career. I'm Billy Floyd, and I started my career in 1968 in Barnwell School District 45. In those days, some of you may have read in the history books, and looking around, you probably, you certainly did not experience the term the Barnwell Ring. At that time in South Carolina, the Barnwell Ring consisted of Representative Saul Blott and Senator Edgar Brown, and they controlled the state of South Carolina. And they both were from Barnwell, lived right there in Barnwell. So we could get some things done in Barnwell that probably some other school districts could not get done. But it was a good place for me to start because I was a young man, as Walt said, didn't know much. I started out teaching math and coaching. And after the first year, they realized that they had found a sucker. And so they gave me the buses to supervise. In those days, back then, the buses came under the high school, and so the principal called me in and said, "We're so glad that you volunteered to do the buses." And so I had a very unique experience, because if you think back in the 60s, you will think back that it was a time of integration. And Barnwell District 45 was under court order to integrate their schools the following year. But prior to doing that, the board and superintendent made the decision that they would integrate their transportation system one semester before they integrated the schools. And of course, being the transportation director, that fell for me to do, and I was a total of 22 years old. And so it was quite a unique but valuable experience for me. But I taught for a couple of years and coached, and then I became principal of a ninth grade building, then was principal of the high school there, went on to be a principal, left there and went to Horry County and was principal of Loris High School, and stayed there for a couple of years and moved to the district office, and then became a superintendent in 1977. I was about 28 years old, 29 years old when I became a superintendent. Those are unheard of today. Very few people at that age have the opportunity to serve as a superintendent. But when I was in Horry County, a position for assistant superintendency came up, and I applied for it. And the superintendent called me in, and he said, "Billy," he said, I would like to recommend you for that job, but I cannot recommend you for the job because of things that I am not at liberty to say, and a lot of it is political." So I learned very quickly that politics do play a part in just about any and everything that we do. But so I left there that year and went to, as a superintendent, to a small district in Clarendon County, in Turbyville, Clarendon 3. And that was my first superintendency, and I stayed there for 11 years. And I learned probably more than they did during those 11 years. Clarendon 3 at that time, if you looked at the rankings and so forth by the State Department, it was the poorest school district in the state when you looked at wealth per pupil. When you looked at the number of students you had enrolled and looked at the wealth of the district, it ranked at the bottom in the district. And then, so I decided that I would maybe try to move to a larger school district, and applied for the superintendency in Clover, and became the superintendent of Clover. And if you looked at those same rankings, then you would find that Clover was the richest school district in the state. So I went from the poorest school district in the state to the richest school district in the state by changing jobs, and I didn't know really what to do, because when you make a budget and those kinds of things, as all of you will learn, it was a complete different process that I had to learn when I got to Clover. But that was a valuable experience, and then I stayed there 9 years as a superintendent, and came to Lexington 2 and was superintendent there for several years. And then I retired from Lexington 2, and I told these guys that I had to retire to go to work. But I had some health problems, and it took me about a year to get straightened out, and now I'm working with, as Dr. Lindsay said, working with Southern Association of Colleges and Schools in the accreditation process, and also working with the South Carolina School Boards Association in working with school boards, and in especially the recruitment of superintendents for school districts. But you mentioned accreditation, and you mentioned the State Department moving those guys out or whatever. Southern Association has recently signed an agreement with the State Department that we will become the accrediting arm for all Southern Association accredited schools for the State Department. So
Times they are changing.
we're making progress, I hope. Time will tell.
TEC.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I am TEC Dowling, and for those of you in the studio audience, I'm sure it's very obvious to you, but for those of you that are watching on TV monitors, I am the youngest of the three. My story is not nearly as interesting as these two guys. They're great friends of mine, by the way. Everybody needs to know that. There's really an organization, a fraternity, a sorority, whatever you want to call it, that exists among superintendents, and we're all really very close-knit. But as Billy just said, times are changing, and I'm not sure that I know all the superintendents anymore in South Carolina. But I started off as a teacher and coach. Matter of fact, it's going to sound like my career has patterned itself after Walter Tobin. I started off as a teacher and coach, went back home to a small town in Marlborough County, stayed there for 5 years. Got a call from the gentleman, Maurice Waddell, who had been principal there for a couple of years, had moved on to Hartsville, called me up, and he was looking for an assistant principal. Went to Hartsville and stayed there a couple of years as assistant principal, and then to Lamar as high school principal. Then got a call one day about the possibility of going to the State Department of Education to work in the Office of Accreditation, and Walter and I worked together there. As a matter of fact, there are a number of people that worked in that particular office then that went on to become superintendents here in South Carolina. Stayed there for about 5 years and realized that I wanted to go back to work again, and had the great good fortune of having the opportunity to go to Somerville, where I worked for Dr. Sandra Lindsay. She was my immediate supervisor in Somerville, and we had a great relationship down there. I was director of middle and secondary education, and I will tell you that the opportunities that were afforded me at the State Department of Education to become no longer just a big fish in a little pond, but to get to know what was going on not only across the state but across the country, were wonderful. And then I went to Somerville and I worked with some really quality people there, like Sandy. I learned a lot from Sandy, and I learned a lot from other people there. And the superintendent there afforded me the chance to do some things that superintendents had to do, but that he didn't particularly care to do. So
that's how we both learned.
Yeah, I think both of us learned a lot that way. And as a result, one day it occurred to me that I said, I believe I can do this. And after 3 years there as director of middle and secondary education, I was called one night by a member of the Board of Trustees in Newberry County and asked if I would apply for the job. Charlie Williams played a role in that too. This board member had contacted Dr. Williams and asked him if he would recommend a few people across the state as possible candidates for the job, and he gave them my name. So went to Newberry, stayed there for 7 years, had some real interesting experiences in Newberry. Newberry is a quality place to live. There are a lot of good people there, but they were faced with some real challenges, particularly in the area of school facilities at that point in time. Stayed there for 7 years and felt like we did some positive things while I had the chance to be there. And then had the opportunity to go to Fort Mill as the superintendent up there. And I stayed there for 8 years. Retired June 30th of this year. And on July the 2nd, got a call about interviewing for the interim superintendency in Lexington School District 5. And I'll just have to admit to you, and I think both of these guys would tell you the same thing, when you've done what we've done for as long as we've done it, you can't just cut it off immediately. I stayed home for 3 days and I was bored to death. I really was. And so when the call came, I said, I really would like to come talk to you. And the board members in District 5 offered me the opportunity to come up there and spend a year with them as they went through the process of searching for a new superintendent. So I've been there since August the 1st and have had some wonderful experiences there. Not everybody gets the chance to serve as superintendent in Fort Mill School District 4 and Lexington School District 5, which are considered, and it's not because of me serving as superintendent, but because of the good people that are there. But to serve as superintendent in both of those school districts, I think, is really a blessed opportunity. So I am now doing that till the end of June this year. The search process is underway. Dr. Floyd and the School Boards Association is going to be involved in that search. Walter Tobin is serving as interim in Newberry County, where I was at one point in time. Just share this with you. I found this to be real interesting. Walter and Buddy Jennings, some of you may know Buddy, he was superintendent in one of the Spartanburg districts.
Spartanburg 2.
Spartanburg 2. He retired this summer also, and he stayed retired even less time than I did. I think he stayed retired one day, and then he took the job in York 1 as interim superintendent. And all three of us were in a meeting of the superintendent's group here in Columbia a couple of months ago. And during the meeting, the discussion was focusing around nominations for Superintendent of the Year, nominations for District Office Employee of the Year, nominations for Principal of the Year, and it occurred to me that there was no award for Interim Superintendent of the Year. And when I mentioned that to the group, everybody enjoyed laughing about that, but nobody offered to promote it. So Walter, Buddy, and I sat down, and we did rock, paper, and scissors, and I'm pleased to announce to you that Buddy Jennings is the interim superintendent of the year in South Carolina right now. And I'm glad to be here tonight.
It's the only way it could go. Well, this is for you, by the way. We didn't hand that to you earlier on. These folks, as you know, are aspiring administrators, or a couple are already in leadership roles within their schools, and they've sent questions to me. We won't get to all of them, obviously, tonight, but one of the things that was a common theme through all of that is to hear from you folks what you look for in an effective principal, because they're going to be interviewing for these jobs. What is it that you always looked for in an effective principal?
You know, and this sounds so trite and trivial, but it's absolutely what I believe in. Do the people care about children? And that's a trait that comes across, I'll promise you, it comes across in an interview. Because when you go in to discuss your beliefs, what you think about particular aspects of the educational process, the teaching learning process, it will come across very quickly whether or not your focus is primarily on children. And I wear this little pin here, you can't see it too well, but it says children first. I've been wearing that for 16 years now. And I wear it as a reminder to myself, I wear it as a reminder to other people also, that that's going to be our primary concern whenever we make a decision, whenever we operate, whatever we do. Well, I want to see that same belief, that same characteristic in anybody that I'm talking to with regards to becoming a principal in the school district where I'm working. I want to make sure that they care about children, and honesty and integrity are critical, absolutely critical.
You know, one of the things that when you're interviewing for a position as a prospective principal, whatever it is, I think most superintendents look for some enthusiasm. I mean, when you sit there and people sit back and talk in a monotone voice and so forth, and they don't give you the idea that they have a passion for what for this job. I look also for what TEC's talking about, children first. But I want to see a passion, and I want this individual to really want this position, and to show that as an old saying, that the fire is burning for them to become a principal, and they're ready to go forward and lead. I mean, we can look at leadership qualities and all of those things, but that's just some of the little things that come across in there.
I'll echo that, and I'm looking for somebody in addition to that. Two things that you're looking for: somebody who can establish relationships with people. When you talk to somebody, do they come across as warm and friendly? And I won't say the other thing you got to have opposite to that, but you got to be a little tough too. But I'm looking for somebody who's got the energy to develop the relationships with people and the energy. There are many a night in my young career that my wife would bring my children to the office, and old Pyrex dishes, and we'd clear the desk off, and we'd have dinner with them, because that's the only time I saw them, when she brought them to us sometimes. So you've got to have somebody who's willing to make a commitment. If you think this is a job that you're going to show up at 7:30 in the morning and 4 o'clock you're finished, then you probably need to do something else. So somebody's got to have all those things, develop a relationship with people, and when I talk about that, I was talking to somebody just recently, and one of the things that I've been big on is children wearing their hats in the buildings. And I was talking to somebody else who's describing a principal how they handle that, and very often when a kid walked in the building this time of year with his hat on, sometimes just a very mistake. And so rather than confront somebody all the time, and sometimes you simply say, and the kid takes his hat off. Those are the kind of things that you want children to have that faith in you and develop a relationship with you to a point. Now, you don't want to be friendly with people, but you want to develop a relationship and understand this requires a lot of time and a lot of energy.
One of the things that is a key question, and we've talked about it a lot, is that being a principal, being an administrator, certainly being a superintendent, does not leave you much life of your own. You belong to all of those students and all of those parents, and so how do you strike that balance between the family responsibilities you have and the professional responsibilities that you're taking on? Well, you talked about sometimes family came to you. Were there?
Yeah.
What were some of the other balance things that you tried to achieve to make that work?
I took up golf about 2.5 years ago, and I got the bug, and I enjoy it. I would never be any good at it. I chose to not involve myself in that, and I found some other things to do. I spent a lot of time with my family when I could, but I chose a quiet. If you say I'm a gardener, I'm not a gardener, but I like to see things grow. So my downtime was when I was digging in the yard. I like to see things come out of the ground, and that's how I did that. So you balance that. You've got to spend some time with your families. You've got to have some recreation for yourself. You've got a lot of time that you put in, but it's got to be some time that you have for yourself and to revive yourself. Now, I've buried a few board members under some azaleas in my yard. I said that. Literally, I figured it.
There's some discreet headstones out there.
There's some things that you have to have. You have to find what that mix is, and I think you've got to balance that. You got to give your folks some time. My son is a high school principal. Used to come with me, and when these fellows talked about during the time the schools were integrated, and it was a kind of difficult time for a lot of people who were leading schools. And folks stopped doing activities, just quit doing things in the evening. And I chose not to do that. My children in Denmark like to dance. They enjoy that. And I said, here are the rules that you, as long as you behave yourself, as long as we clean up after we finish, and if you bring your friends from somewhere else, you're responsible for them. So don't allow them to disrupt what you're about. And my son used to come with me to ball games, and he'd come out sometimes after dances on Friday night and hang out with me just a little while. And some of the kids would take him home somewhere around 10:30, whatever time it was. But you've got to find ways to do that.
I always reserved Sunday was one of the days that was family time. I mean, just you gotta have time for the family, and unfortunately, and I'm not sitting here saying that I spent that time with my two children as much time as I wish I had, and that's unfortunate. But when you, going back to the word commitment, when you are committed to the job, and Dr. Lindsay said, it's almost a 24/7 position. You're there. When I first started getting tickets to the football games, I had them kind of on the side, but for 30-something years, I had always watched football games from the end zone because I was always available where people could see me, where if there were any trouble or anything that needed to be tended to, they knew exactly where I was. So all my life, I've always watched football games in the end zone. So I traded my tickets so I could get to the end zone where I could know what was going on. I couldn't figure it out from the middle. And then the other thing was involving them in as many activities as you can in your present position. If you're a superintendent, letting them come with you to some of the events and still, sharing some time. But I always did try to reserve Sundays to spend time not only, in church or whatever, but after church we try to do some activities and things with the children.
And let me echo some of what Billy and Walter have already said. First of all, you need to understand up front, if you plan on becoming a school administrator, you're getting ready to make a commitment that's going to result in you having to make some sacrifices. And not only will you have to make sacrifices, but your family's going to have to make sacrifices. So make sure, before you take that step, that everybody knows what the expectations are going to be, what your life is going to be like. If you're going to do it and you're going to do it the way it's supposed to be done, you're not going to be able to live the life of a teacher. It is different. And to echo what's already been mentioned, personally, I think there are several things you've got to do. First of all, you've got to have a faith. And that's up to you. Your faith is your own choice, but I believe you need to have a faith. And you need to practice that faith. And second of all, and immediately right behind that, is you need to cling very closely to your family, because they're going to miss you and you're going to miss them. You're going to miss some things that you would not normally miss. So every chance you get, be there with them. Third, I think you better take care of yourself. And like Billy and Walter said, you need to have something that is strictly for yourself. You need to have a hobby that you can go and participate in, and when you get out there and you're involved in that, school business is not a part of what you're thinking about. I've done fishing, and I've done golfing. Both of them require a certain level of concentration, and my brain won't allow me to think about that concentration area as well as school business. So find you something where you can remove yourself from school business, and make sure you practice it on a regular basis. And I'd also tell you to take care of yourself as far as your health is concerned. That's going to be critical, because what you're going to notice is the mental strain, pressure, stresses. Those are obvious. They're there all the time. Even on your best days, they're going to be there. What you are not going to realize are the physical effects of those stresses, pressures that you're going to be feeling. So do everything you can to take care of yourself physically also.
TEC, I think that's important, because one of the things, as both of you know, the last year that I was a superintendent in Lexington too, I had a lot of health problems. And I never, if anybody had told me a lot earlier in my career that I would let stress get to me, that it would really affect me or whatever, I would not have believed it, because I honestly thought that I handled stress better than just about anybody. I mean, it just, I really thought that I could handle the stress. And yet when I started experiencing the health problems, in going to getting a second opinion, even a third opinion from different folks, doctor groups, every one of them would tell me that really the stress didn't cause the problem, but that it was keeping it there, that the stress level, and they recommended, every one of them recommended that I leave the superintendency and find something a little bit less stressful. Well, that could have been most anything, because you are under a lot of stress, and the majority of the stress, in my opinion, that comes is as much as you put on yourself to really excel and be of service and do a good job as other people put on you. because you really want to serve them or whatever. I mean, you're trying to do the very best job that you can do, and so dealing with that stress is an important issue in all of these positions, administrative positions.
You may have just answered my next question, because I want to ask you, what's the hardest part of being a superintendent? What's the toughest part of it?
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know. I just immediately, when you said that, the first thing that came to me goes back to the previous question that you asked, and that was a balance. Mm-hmm. Balancing everything, because you've got, as an administrator, if you're a principal, you've got the superintendent pulling at you, you've got teachers pulling at you, you've got your family pulling at you, you've got parents pulling at you. If it's a superintendent, you've got the board pulling at you, and those kind of things. So, where is that happy balance? That was what I found to be the toughest, and it was trying to deal with all of those things and keep a happy balance.
That too, and a problem for me is sometimes making decisions about people, and sometimes you're going to have to make some hard decisions. But when you do that, if you lay out all the facts, and I've had to make some hard decisions about folks over a period of time. The first thing you do is you keep children in front of you. If you make a decision based on children, and you don't get personal. But the hardest thing I've had to do is to make some decisions about people's careers. And I think about that. I spend a lot of time going over things. And what my measure is, if I've had to do that, and somebody's not doing well in their particular position, and I've got to make a decision about it. If I can go back 10 years later and says, and run it over in my mind, and I've done right, then I can sleep well at night. But every once in a while, there's going to have to be, somebody's not going to be doing what they need to be doing. And it's impacting, having a negative impact on children, then sometimes you have to make that. Now that was hard for me. That is probably, I'm one of those guys who likes everything to go well, and so I've got to be somebody else when I do that.
Well, we've talked about that some in class, and the fact of the matter is, I bet you guys would agree with me, is that very often you like the person. They were a great individual. It isn't personal. It isn't about the person at all. But the recognition sometimes comes, and the hardest part, I think, of this job is standing toe to toe with somebody, and for their good, and obviously for the good of children, calling it like it is, and making sure that you help guide them to a different career or make a change so that the youngsters in their care don't suffer.
Right. And sometimes that means putting somebody in another place. It doesn't always mean dismissing people. Sometimes folks are unsuccessful in one place. You assess their skills, and you maybe just be able to put them somewhere else, and then they flourish, And I've had people, they don't tell you personally, but I don't care too much for Tobin, but he did. They kind of want the information, but I like where I am.
Well, that reminded me whenever I was having my health problems, and I was in the hospital, and my health problems was really a result of some heart problems. And one of the teachers came into the district office to see me, and they said, "Well, I'm sorry," I said, "he's in the hospital with heart problems." And she said, "Y'all lying." Said, "I know better than that." Said, "That man ain't got a heart." Said, "I know him." So that's kind of...
Yeah, I'm reminded of a situation, and trust me, better than 50% of what you'll do as a principal or as a superintendent is deal with personnel issues. We are a personnel business. We are a people business. So a lot of what you're going to do is going to be dealing with those issues. But I'm reminded of a particular situation one time whenever one of the high school principals in the district where I was working was not being successful. I'm not sure it was totally his fault, but there were too many factors and issues going on there, and he was not going to be successful. And so I had the opportunity to move him to an elementary school as a principal, which I did. and it greatly angered him. It really did. He had very little use for me at that point in time. A year later, he came back to me and he said, "You know, you saved my life." And that's exactly what Walter is talking about, what Dr. Lindsay is talking about. Sometimes decisions have to be made that are in the best interest not only of the school and the children that you're serving, but they have to be made in the best interest of that particular individual. And he or she may not realize it up front. But in the long run, you may be able to serve both of them well. But they're not easy things to do. I preach, and I have been preaching as a superintendent for 16 years, family. Because I truly believe, given the atmosphere that exists in public education today and some of the battles that we're fighting, some of the efforts that are underway that appear to be directed towards undermining public education, that we've got to stick together. We've got to be about the business of being a family and supporting each other all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't disagree on issues. My brother is a career and technology educator here in the state. My sister is a kindergarten teacher, and my oldest daughter is a 5th grade teacher. And I can promise you that whenever we get together, we don't totally agree on everything because we bring different perspectives into the discussions. But at the end of the day, they're my family. And we care about each other, we're concerned about each other, and we'll be there immediately to support each other, whatever the issue may be. So I'm about the business of preaching that constantly within the ranks of the school districts that I've been blessed to work in, that we're going to be family. Now, that becomes very difficult to deal with when you do have a personnel issue. And it could well indeed be somebody that you really like. But you have to make a decision that at the bottom line is going to serve the children, the school, and the school district best.
Just want to say just one thing, and when you sometimes have to make those decisions, don't send somebody else to do it.
Oh, no.
Good point.
If you got to take bad news or good news, deliver it yourself. Have enough gumption, look somebody in the eye, and say, "Here's what I'm going to do." But don't hide behind somebody else.
Because that speaks to honesty,
Yeah.
integrity, professionalism. So many of the things that we talked about is that, and it's really, it would really be easier to give that task to somebody else. But the courage that it takes to lead in this business means it takes the courage to deliver the bad news just with the same determination that you go and deliver that good news. I want to come back to some of the issues in education, but before we leave this one, does a teacher make a good assistant principal, make a good principal, make a good district office person, make a good superintendent? That's how we sort of see this happening these days. What are those differences between how that works out in reality sometimes?
Well, that can be, in first place, I believe that's the process that should occur. I believe you've got to have that foundation in each one of those particular areas before you advance to become particularly successful at whatever level. It also gives you that credibility whenever you're working with people in different situations in the school business. But the unfortunate side of that is, too often we go to our best teachers and encourage them to pursue administration. And really, everybody in this room knows that the real teaching, learning process is going to be determined by what goes on when the classroom door closes. So we need to encourage good people who are directed towards administration and have that desire. We need to support them in that. But we also need to encourage those people who are good teachers to stay there if that's where they're going to best serve themselves and children.
You know, the natural progression a long time ago, and Walt, this was during our time. If you listen to what all three of us said, was that you started out as a teacher, a coach, and then somehow or another you ended in administration, and just about, especially high school principals. I mean, you didn't really get to be a high school principal unless you had probably been a coach in a high school somewhere. And that was the progression back then. I think those days are gone, because I mean, that's not necessarily true. One of the trends that does bother me just a little bit right now, in talking about the progression and the background that you have in order to, because you've been there, done that, and the credibility, is that there's a move among a lot of school board to employ managers, not necessarily with an educational background, but that, to bring them from the business or from some other area, because what they're saying is, we're looking for somebody as a manager. We're not looking for somebody to do that, and that's a little bit disturbing to me as an educator.
Chris, you had a question?
I just had a quick question. In terms of both of you've hit on credibility. Right now, obviously going through the program, I talked to some of my colleagues, and they kind of joke with me because I only have 4 years experience. I know the answer to this is probably going to be PC, but in the interviewing process, is there any kind of, kind of general years experience, or is it more on-site interview questions? Is it more of a feel, or does that kind of, in terms of credibility, years of experience kind of factor into decisions being made to place someone in probably a starting assistant principal's role?
This is a good group to ask that question. Superintendent at 29, high school principal at 29. Walter, you
High school principal at 27.
So,
That's
some people can
atypical.
have 1 year experience 30 times over, and some people can have 30 years of experience. So I think it particularly is determined by the individual, and what kind of qualities and traits and knowledge base that they display. But again, it goes to character. It goes to caring about children, relationships, and whether or not you can handle relationships and you can communicate to people. That 1 year experience 4 times over, or 4 years of experience.
But it would seem that you would be more susceptible to scrutiny, being a 1 year teacher, as you say, and jumping into a leadership role. If one thing messed up, 1 year teacher, see, I knew he didn't really know, as opposed to someone who's been there 10 years would be a little bit more of would be allowed a little bit more leeway for something that didn't quite work out quite as much. Do you mean having that, not so much?
You're going to be under scrutiny that first year.
Well, or I don't know.
What you can bring to the table.
I had taught for 5 years. I just learned what the teaching learning process was all about, and I made a high school principal. At the time, I was made a high school principal because I was the only male on the faculty who was close to getting a master's. Didn't have the master's yet. Had the courses, hadn't taken my comps yet. Now, it was a very under a lot of scrutiny, because there were some women on the faculty who were much more capable of doing, but they didn't get women high school principalships back in those days. There are a lot of them now. So yeah, and you should expect that, but you want to do what you know. Don't try to be something that you're not, and because you expose yourself. But anytime somebody takes on a new responsibility, there is a learning curve. And you can do it with 4 years of experience or 10 years of experience. So they take you out of the classroom and put you in an administrative responsibility. It's something you're going to have to learn. I don't care how much training you've done. Most of my learning has been on the job primarily. Now, I have taken what I have gathered in the classroom in my graduate classes and parlayed that into my work environment. But so you tie both of those together, but you're going to be under scrutiny. People are going to look at you and see whether, because there are going to be some other people who think they should have gotten the job. What you have to do when you walk into that responsibility, no matter what level you are, you can always say, somebody had enough confidence in me to give me that opportunity, and evidently they saw something in me that they didn't see in somebody else that got it. Now, that doesn't mean always that person is not because the person doesn't get a job mean they're not qualified. Maybe they weren't qualified for that job, or that wasn't a good fit for that job. So you're going to be under scrutiny, but you always remember that somebody had enough confidence in you to give you that opportunity.
We've said that, thank you so much, so many times about, taking on that responsibility. And Maddie Dillon was here and gave wonderful advice. Let's see if we can get affirmation from this group about when you're in that teacher role and want to make that move to administration, taking on any leadership responsibilities that you can do, doing committee responsibilities, being involved in Southern Association visits, showing yourself as interested in the role is the best thing that you can do to build those leadership opportunities. And they've also heard me say thank you for reinforcing about 1 million times. I'll do the best I can with this classwork. We'll do all we can to talk about what it's like, but you're going to learn to be an administrator when you are given an administrative role. And we just hope that you're able to go back to the notes and back to the experiences and back to the classroom kinds of things to pull something that helps. So you can't say, gosh, that program didn't prepare me. The only preparation for being a school administrator is to get in there and do it, in my opinion. I think you just have to. I don't know any other way to do that. I don't know enough courses and classwork that we can give folks to do that.
And you call on your resources. You don't walk around quoting authors. You don't do that. But it becomes a part of you. You learn to do it, and what you learn, you over time, you will put some of that in place.
And be a part of a network. You heard TEC mention the fact that superintendents are kind of a close-knit group or whatever. I didn't hesitate to pick up the phone and call a neighboring superintendent and just to bounce things off of them. One of the things that in every school district, there's only one of you. I mean, you look at other professions, there's doctors and they can go from another doctor, but in your district, you're the only one, you're the only superintendent in that district. Somebody says you're the loneliest person in town. And that may be true, but don't hesitate as a principal to form a network with other principals and establish dialogue to just bounce things off. Not that you have to do what they have done over there, but at least you have somebody that you can talk to. And even as a teacher, when you first become a teacher, talking with other teachers, establishing that dialogue, communication, which is so important with forming relationships, not only with present teachers, but businesses and community, and staying in touch and communicating and letting people know what's going on.
I absolutely think that's
is
essential.
important.
I called a colleague of mine that I could trust when I became a superintendent, and I said, "Sir, I think I can trust you. Don't tell folks how dumb my questions are." So I called him one day with a question. He said, "Well, that isn't even a question. You don't even know what the questions are. I know you don't know the answer."
You don't know what question to ask.
But there's a way to your colleagues will help you.
TEC mentioned it a minute ago, and I want to take you back to a topic that troubles, I think, most of us who've been in this business now for a while, and that's sort of the threats that we see to education nationwide and threats to education in South Carolina. There are a couple of things that you all have had long and distinguished careers. You've watched lots of changes happen to education over that period of time. What's about to happen? What are the threats now and in the future that you see that are coming for education, public education in South Carolina?
I don't think that public education is ever going to go away, because I don't think there are going to be enough opportunities outside of public education to serve all children. However, I think that we need to stop complaining and whining about some of the things that are going on, that are being promoted, and recognize that they're going to become a reality. And what I'm talking about is alternative forms of education. Forms of education that are provided, that are not public education, but public funding may be directed towards those forms. And if they are going to happen, and they are going to happen, they're probably not going to happen before I wrap up my career, but they're going to happen before y'all wrap up your careers, then what are we going to do to make sure that whenever those options are made available, that our option is the one that people select? We don't want to see a drainage from public education of the brighter, sharper minds who have the means to attend other forms of education. We want them to choose our public education because we're providing good opportunities and a viable option that is attractive to people. And what are we doing to make sure that we're there? Well, I like to think that we're doing some really good things. And I had the pleasure of working with Fort Mill School District 4 as it went through a fairly radical change over the course of the last 5 years, where we have where integrated into the curriculum was career and technology education in the form of career clusters that have provided opportunities to every level of child and made it attractive to them. Kids that want to go to school, they want to be involved in these programs because they can see results coming from them. And I don't want to be negative about any particular course in our curriculum, but you know, sometimes kids challenge, well, what use is this going to be for me in the future? Well, if we can show them that the programs that we're providing to them are not only going to be of use to them, but are going to be something that they are interested in, that's going to provide a lifetime career for them, then they want to come to school. They're happy to be there. That's the type of option that I think we've got to pursue and pursue very strongly. And that's one of the things that the Education and Economic Development Act is about. Now, we've got to just make sure that funding is provided for that particular piece of legislation.
I really do think that that choice is going to be one of the key words in the future. What form that choice is, I'm not sure. I don't know whether it's going to be, I don't think it will be with a voucher system. At least I hope it will not be with a voucher system. But I think we will see some form of choice. If you talk to legislators today, I think that the majority of them will tell you that some form of choice. And so we've got to do, I echo what TEC has said, we've got to do everything possible to maintain the integrity of the public school system and make sure that that is the choice. But there's a couple of other things that I am real concerned about that I see on the horizon, and that is there was a statistic that was quoted to me that I think it's over 50%, maybe more than that, of the superintendents in this state are on the Terry plan. Now, you
don't applaud now.
But if you stop and think about that, and then not only that, but if you go into the school leadership, you will find that there is a high percentage of principals at all levels that are on the Terry plan. So over the next several years, and I don't know how many that will be, depending on how long they want to work and things like that, but we're going to see a drastic change in faces that are in leadership positions. And so I think it's important that we have things like this, because school districts, they have relied on universities or other agencies or whatever to really provide the leadership training and the leadership opportunities to help them. There is nothing that beats on-the-job experience. We've already said that. You're going to learn to do that. But I do have a real concern about that issue, because already we're seeing a lot of the positions, top position or superintendencies in this state. We see a lot of them coming from out of state. Well, in other words, people who have put in 25 or 30 years from another state, and they have retired, yet they feel like they still have 7 or 8 more years, and they come and become superintendents in South Carolina. And some of them are great individuals. I'm not saying that they're not doing a good job, but it takes them a little while to get involved in the total state picture. Because one of the things that we have to remember is that, whether it's Lexington 4, Lexington 2, Fort Mill, or Lexington 5, whatever it is, that's just one part and has just a few of the children in the state. And we as educators have to be concerned about all of the children in the state of South Carolina. And so, if I come in and I'm from Maryland, and I'm planning on staying here 5, 6, 7 years, but I know that when I finish that 5, 6, 7 years, I'm going back to Maryland, then I'm not so sure I'm going to put too much energy out to become involved in improving the conditions and so forth in South Carolina. And so I have a concern for that, and I think that we need, in South Carolina, we really need good individuals to come up through the ranks in our schools and to assume and be prepared to assume those leadership positions as they become available.
3 quick things. One is I'm excited about the youth in this room, and maybe out there as well. I've showed us some young people, but there's not too many times I've come to do this over the years, Dr. Lindsay, that I didn't see somebody in this audience that I knew. So you're really young, because you come across, except for Haywood Hickman, who I worked with a long time ago in Swansea. So I'm excited that there's a pipeline of people coming through the system. The second thing is we're going to have alternative ways that we're going to deliver instruction. The technology is going to have a great impact on that. But people are looking for homeschooling and private schooling and other kinds of ways to do that. I simply say is that they all should be accountable. If you're going to create those avenues for people to deliver instruction to their children and deliver education to their children, then we all have to be accountable. If you're going to do it at the private school and give money to that, if you're going to give it to homeschooling, or if you're going to give it to other kinds of means of supporting that, then everybody ought to take the PAC test. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do it that way, then there ought to be a level playing field. Second, just very quick, the third thing very quickly, Walter Tobin sits in this room tonight because of public education. At times it wasn't a great public education. It was a very rural, segregated education, but it was an education, and it did allow me a rural young man from South Carolina, rural South Carolina, had an opportunity to go to school and to go to college. And so I sit here, not because of private education, not because of homeschooling, because of public education. Former Secretary Dick Riley said that he calls teachers the new patriots, because you're going to pass on democracy to children. So if we keep that in mind, if the democracy is going to be passed on, for the majority of the people in South Carolina and this country, it's going to be passed on through public education.
Yeah, let me add just one more thing that really concerns me. These guys say it so well; they're so articulate. But I do want to tell you that I'm concerned particularly about the politicizing of public education. It's becoming more and more political. As a matter of fact, one of the major political parties in our country has announced publicly that they're going to be pursuing local school board elections to have them become partisan. And I would just tell you right now, partisan politics has absolutely no place in public education. And we've got to be very careful to protect that, because that will damage it. I really think that more so than choices, homeschooling, vouchers, anything else, I truly believe that partisan politics is the greatest threat to public education.
I think there's a great deal of truth in that, and it's certainly something I think that concerns all of us, that we spend so much of our time in leadership roles dealing with the political issues that have absolutely nothing to do with instruction for children in classrooms, and do a lot of protection in the role of superintendent to keep those things as far as they can be from principals, but they're becoming far more politicized for principalships than they ever were before. But trying to keep that way away from teachers and classrooms, and yet it's getting harder and harder to do as every single thing seems to be a partisan issue. How you teach evolution or don't teach evolution, or all of those issues, or what you're allowed to do in ceremonies around holidays and religion in schools, and all of those issues that are truly being driven by a political agenda that has little or nothing to do with a teacher determining what lessons for youngsters are the best to help them gain the skills that they're going to need to do what Walt talks about, which is to pass the culture from this generation to the next generation. And that's what education is. And it's ever more complex, obviously, for the young people that we serve now, because the world is broader and the information is broader, and passing that culture to the next generation is a responsibility. And if we do that in a politicized environment, I'm very afraid that they won't have the tools and they won't have the education they need in order to build the kinds of tomorrows that we have had. And like Walt, I'm a product of public school education too, from a very rural, poor area of the upper part of South Carolina. And so public school education was the key for me and for the opportunities that I have, and I'm sure that's true of all four of us.
Very true.
Well, you touched on this. Are there processes, or should there be processes in place in school districts to grow your own leaders, and how should we go about doing that? I know TEC has a bias on that, and I want him to talk about that, but what should we be doing to grow our own leaders, since we're going to be missing, Billy, so many of those that you talked about?
And I think I certainly believe that this is certainly a way to do that, but I think more and more school districts have got to take on some responsibility themselves to develop their leaders in the school district, to recognize people. And we've got 85 school districts in South Carolina, and they do it 85 different ways. Some have the capacity to do it, some do not. But I think that the part of that development, to recognize people, to give them the opportunity, get a commitment from them, and we might have to invest what little funds we have sometimes in those people in our school districts.
And develop our own, grow our own. TEC, you want to talk a little bit about what was going on?
Yeah, we have been involved with the Old English Consortium up in the northwestern part of the state. That includes the 4 districts in York County: Chester, Lancaster, Union, Fairfield, and Cherokee, I believe, are the
Union, I think you said. Did we say Union? Okay.
Union was that.
all of those districts have been involved in a consortium for a number of years, and one of the things that they recognized is that they wanted to do something to promote growing their own leaders. And after a couple of starts and stops and attempts to get a program underway, this lady right here was instrumental in enabling the consortium to be able to enter into an agreement with the University of South Carolina in which a Grow Your Own Leader program has been initiated. This is the first year it's been in operation. Each school district has slots in that program on an annual basis. Well, actually it's on a biannual basis, every 2 years, that are allotted based on the student population in each district, and the school district makes a commitment to pay for 1/2 of the cost of those identified students, teachers who are within the system, those identified teachers to pursue a degree in administration. Now, they announce that, they advertise it in the school district, and the teachers have the availability of applying for the slots, and a selection process occurs, and they, Fort Mill had 2 slots. So those 2 slots, those 2 people were selected. The total cost, $10,000 for the entire program. It's a fast track program where they will receive their degree in 2 years. It includes concentrated summer work and a couple of courses each semester during the fall and spring. The teacher commits to paying $5,000. The school district commits to paying $5,000. At the end of the 2 years, they have a degree in administration. The teacher also makes a commitment to remain within that school district for was it 3
3
years?
years. Mhm.
3 years. And then, and when opportunities become available in administration, of course, they're going to be given the first shot because they've already been identified as potential administrators through the selection process. What did I leave out?
I think that is, and that's what we're talking about, is making the commitment and having folks committing back to a school or a school district, because so many of the times you end up training your good leaders that go somewhere else or that go here or there, and so the combination of growing your own and having them remain within the area where they're trained, I think, is one of the key things that we have to do. And there, as Walt said, lots of different ways to do that, but I think that's a very viable model that we're working on there, and we also have that model going on in Sumter at this point in time as well. But we've got to tap, we've got to go out there, and you all will be doing this too. Tap on the shoulder of those folks who have the potential and talk to them about entering the profession and going through the training of becoming an administrator, because we are going to have those ranks that are going to be openings that will be there, and we really got to have the kind of leadership. The quality of life in South Carolina, I've said to you so many times, depends on the quality of leadership that we have in schools, in my opinion. And so I think we do have to do the kinds of things that we need to do to grow our own leaders and to make sure that the right folks are in those positions of responsibility so that our youngsters have those opportunities.
That will give that group, that consortium, a group of 25 administrators immediately that are available within that pool. And it's offered every 2 years right now. This is the first year, so a determination is going to be made at the end of the year of whether or not they will change it and offer it every year. But like Dr. Lindsay says, leadership is absolutely critical to the success of a school. Now, we all recognize that the teaching learning process is about what teachers do when the door closes. But a school will not be successful without successful leadership. You can have a good school, but it will not achieve the level that it can achieve without strong leadership. So we've got to promote that leadership. And there are lots of us baby boomers at the superintendency level, at the district office level, at the principalship level that are going to be moving on out of this business right now. In the next 5 years, that leadership is going to turn over almost completely.
So look at all the job opportunities you folks are going to have. Isn't that going to be incredible? David?
Is the Grow Your Own Leaders program looking at going beyond what is in existence right now? In other words, that program would get someone qualified to be a principal, but not to replenish the superintendent positions that are going to come open. You need to go beyond that.
I think you're absolutely right.
PhD
I think you're absolutely right. And no, there aren't any specific kinds of things at this point in time other than doing some cohorts for an EDS and for PhD programs that we're looking at in the upstate so that we continue that pipeline. Because you're absolutely right, David. We've got to continue that training and that opportunity so that folks can have those to open up.
And that might rest more with from a statewide perspective.
I think it does.
Because every school district it just has one of those. So it's more of a, and the State Department used to do some of that.
Right,
they're doing
right.
The State Department does have a
leadership training program, and we're working
superintendent internship
right.
program or whatever that they foster, because I go over and
Talk
work
with that
with them.
group and
Yeah,
work with that group.
work with them every year.
But something that we need to
and looking
foster
at-
statewide. I want to ask you folks about No Child Left Behind, accountability, assessment, PACT, all those things that are sort of the things that we're knee-deep in. I have lots of questions in this group of questions about, how is it that we explain to a community, a school that hasn't made AYP, when it's a small group of special needs youngsters who are the only ones that didn't make that, and we've talked a lot in class about why that's true and how we deal with that. But so how should we be reacting as an educational entity to all of these things that are going on at the national level and at the state level too?
Well, that's a good one.
Well,
Who wants to jump in there first? It's not a problem with the accountability issue because there's nobody out here scared of accountability. It doesn't frighten us. We're accountable every day. It's the fact that it's so difficult to explain to the public. How many of you think parents are really reading report cards?
I didn't see any hands going, oh, I know they are.
How many of you got past the ratings? Or myself?
Right.
You know, that's the first place I look. And again, I'm blessed to be in District 5. District 5 is one of the 3 districts in the state that was excellent this year. Well, I didn't need to go any further, did I? I can go out and tell that to the community, and we're one of 3. But
So
when
we-
you start getting past excellent, and you get to average, unsatisfactory, and it was one small subgroup where the child was unable to take the test that day in a special needs area, and you try to explain that to a group of parents, how do you do that? Walter?
I haven't gotten a call about a report card yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Me either.
Now, there's some places where that's important. Some places it's not. But you let the football coach not have a good season.
Oh, yeah.
So we are certainly accountable. And what I think about, one of the things about No Child Left Behind is the fact that, again, a part of that level playing field. If a youngster in Texas takes their test, there's a greater chance of that child being proficient than in South Carolina. We're doing the right thing to having the stringent requirements that we have. I think it's the right thing to do for children because a standard is higher than most places, we're working harder and we're making more difference in more children. I don't know whether you can explain that to a hostile environment or not. If somebody really doesn't want to listen to what I have to say, then I prod along and do the best I can and work hard for these children and give them everything that we are capable of providing for them. And at the end, you just have to hope at the end that the results will be there, that 2010 or 2014, whenever that target date is, our children will have moved to that point. And I think we're doing a great job in that. I don't know whether you can do that right now. Now, when people in some parts of this country are calling public schools government schools, so you know there's a concerted effort out there to be critical, to attempt to destroy. But I think we'll get past this. But as TEC said, we don't mind being accountable. I mean, our folks are working hard out there every day. There are some places where it's more difficult to do it than others, and I worked in some of those places, but I think folks are prodding along and doing all they can to make it right for children.
I think Inez has done a pretty good job because I think that one of the things you have to look at is, where have we come from? And I look at me growing up on a small tobacco farm in it's a ghost town now, Old They got one store on Main Street, I think, that's still open. And but I look at that setting, and then I look back over my career, and looking at a lot of these schools statewide, you look at where the progress that we have made. Yes, it's hard to explain why you didn't make AYP and because of one little subgroup. However, if you really look at the progress that school district has made, and I'm not saying all of them because there's some of them that haven't made the progress that they need to, and we know that, and that's the whole purpose of the accountability system. But as far as statewide, if you look at the progress we have made, and I think people forget that. It reminds me of administrators, and one of the things that you may need to recognize right now that you will do as an administrator, you will do a lot of great things in your career. You will help a lot of people and everything. But toward the end of your career, if you mess up 1 or 2 times, then if you aren't careful, that's what you'll be remembered for. People forget about all of the good that you do. And board members are the world's best at doing that. I mean, you can have a superintendent who's been there for, say, 5 or 6 years that has made tremendous progress in a district or whatever, but let him kind of get slack in just one little time, and they forget about all of the good stuff that you have done. So you're on a daily basis. But I think if you look at this accountability and where we were, the progress we have made over the last several years, and then also, as Walt said, the expectations. Tell people, here's where we're striving to go, and we are gradually getting there. Then I think that's about all you can do.
It occurs to me. First of all, I want to ask you: is the statue of Billy Floyd still up in Atlanta? Well, I won't go there.
Let's don't go there.
But here's something that occurs to me. How many of you think you can walk into a school and know whether or not there's education going on there? There's good, solid education going on. I believe I can. I really do believe I can. And I bet you these two guys can too. I believe that if you establish an atmosphere where a parent walks into your school and is confident that there are good things going on there, and that they trust you as an administrator and the teachers on that staff, I think you'll have, just like Walter said, you won't get many telephone calls about report cards. But we have got to make sure that we internally concern ourselves about accountability issues, and that we continuously strive to make sure that progress is occurring. It's obvious in some places, in other places it's difficult to demonstrate, but I'll bet you even in those districts progress is occurring. It's just not nearly as visible. Trust and confidence is what it's about right now. Who is the community going to believe? The newspaper who prints something negative, or Walter Tobin as the superintendent who they believe in? I believe they're going to say, well, I know what Dr. Tobin's doing, and I'm okay with what's going on.
If we build those relationships.
If you establish that trust factor.
Mm-hmm. And if we don't do that, they're likely to believe those other sources. But I think we have to build those relationships. So do we test too much in South Carolina?
God, yes.
Amen?
Absolutely.
All the way across. We spend more time doing that than we could spend days in instruction. I figured I could get an amen out of this group for that. How should we finance schools in South Carolina? I haven't asked you a finance question all evening, but I really must before we do just a little bit more. We only have about 15 minutes left.
With money.
Let's do it with money. Where are we going to get that money, Billy?
I don't know. We have, in South Carolina, we have not looked at alternative methods of financing. We have cut and cut and cut, and I am real concerned about this new tax proposal that is on the horizon of doing away with the property tax and going to a sales tax. I'm not sure that I understand all of the implications. It may be that I just don't know enough about it to know whether I'm for it or against it. I'm concerned about that, but if you look at the percent of the state budget that is going towards public education now, you will find that it is dwindling, and has been for how many years?
Oh gosh, 30 years at least.
A long time, and some things just seem to never change. But I think we're going to have to look at some very creative ways of financing and delivering alternative approaches to education. You mentioned technology, and there will be a lot of different delivery methods for instruction, and I think that maybe that may help some.
Let me just make one comment. I'm going to get a yelp out of this fellow, though, but I think we ought to have statewide funding. But it ought not be how they fund in Denmark, but how they fund in York. Okay. What I'm afraid of, if we have a statewide funding, if all the funding, two things I'm concerned about is that when there's a downturn, local school districts will not have the means by which to make that up. About 2 or 3 years ago, for the first time in my career, I had to go to 3 first-year teachers and tell them that we couldn't hire them back. And you always have enough retirements and people leaving, but I had to go to personally tell 3 teachers. That was one of the toughest things that I've done. So I'm afraid that if we have a statewide funding, and here's why I think you should have a statewide funding, but I think they ought to fund it. You know, a friend of mine calls it having vanilla ice cream, but you don't want the vanilla ice cream that comes out of Piggly Wiggly. Not that it's not bad, but we want the vanilla ice cream with the little beans in it, okay? And that's the way they fund, and that's the way they provide in some school districts in South Carolina, with the little beans in it. But I'm afraid if we have statewide funding, then we're going to wind up with Piggly Wiggly or Kroger. I'm not picking on them, but we're going to wind up with that kind of vanilla ice cream.
Store brand.
A lower
Less than
caliber,
standard,
you know.
yeah.
And that's what concerns me, is that we're going to get a lower level of funding. On the other part of that, it's got to be some leeway. So if you raise the statewide funding, there still should be some means by which, if the Yorkfuls of the world want to offer their children something else, they have the opportunity to do that. But it ought to be high enough to begin with that it doesn't make a whole lot of difference if they get that opportunity to do that. But I'm afraid what we're going to do is we're going to get the lower level of
I would be afraid of that too if we go to statewide funding instead of bringing everybody up to the vanilla ice cream with the beans. That knowing the mindset of what's going on right now in the political arena, that it would be store brand, may even below.
Kroger, don't tell anybody I was talking about Piggly Wiggly.
This is on tape. This is on tape.
You've already
Too late now.
Too late now.
And I know you all recognize the fact that there's such inequities that exist among the various school districts in South Carolina. And you can go to some school districts in South Carolina where the value of a meal is about $10,000.
or less.
And basically, to hire one teacher, they've got to raise millage 5 meals. Well, there are school districts in South Carolina where the value of a meal is several $100,000. And District 5 is not one of the highest, but I'll tell you, right, it's about $350,000 a meal. So that's 7 teachers can be hired by raising taxes 1 meal. So there are definite inequities that exist. And I would agree with Walter that needs to be addressed, the inequities, because it is precluding opportunities for children. However, I do believe that it should not be on a statewide funding basis except for bringing it up to a level. Local authority should not be eliminated. School boards locally should be able to control their own destiny if they want to do more. And that's one of the things that they're talking about eliminating is all local authority. Second thing is I'm real scared of sales taxes. Property taxes is the most stable form of revenue for public education. Over the course of the years, property values are basically either going to remain as they are or they're going to increase. We've just gone through a period in the last 5 years where we've had a decline in the economy. And as a result, state funding, which basically depends on sales taxes, went in the toilet 3 years in a row. And we suffered locally. We do not need to put ourselves in that position. We do not need to eliminate property taxes, and nobody likes to pay them. But the fact of the matter is, if we want services, we're going to have to pay for it.
TEC, you mentioned equity, and Walt, you did too, mentioned talking about equity, and I think there's another word that goes with that, and that is adequacy. You can't, in order to equalize or bring people up, you've got to have an adequate education. You have to have enough money, enough finances or resources to provide an adequate education for the youngsters in your district. There's no other way.
What's the average per pupil expenditure in South Carolina? About $9,000, a little better than $9,000 per pupil.
Add it all up, yeah.
If you add it all up.
If you go to a state in the Midwest, average per pupil expenditure may generally be around $15,000 per pupil. our property taxes, and this is something that's not being stated in all that's going on right now, our property taxes in South Carolina are basically about average as far as others across the country. All you hear about is that they're so high, they are about on the average in the United States.
Or maybe a little below.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to have a little concessions for people who have some difficulty. I think we can find a way to do that. But as Taker said, that funding is stable. It worries me that we go into a statewide sales tax.
That bothers me.
With the highs and lows. There are states that have already experienced that and had the highs and lows. I saw a hand.
The gentleman right there had a question.
Well, you essentially answered what I was going to ask you, because I was going to ask about the equity kind of issues. You know, I mean, from the different extremes of what you saw in the film, you know, the Corridor of Shame, and it's something as simple. I work and live in different districts, and someone said to me where I work, it's just not right that your daughter can take dance where she goes to school and my daughter can't. You know, it just doesn't seem right. But I was also going to ask you about, you've been all over and you've served in different local districts, how important that local control is, which you spoke to a little bit, because I think that's a key issue in terms of equalizing funding. People are afraid that if you equalize the funding, that you're going to give up some of that local control. So I was curious what you thought about how important local control is.
And there are some hostile environments for public schools in the leadership in some places in South Carolina. So the level of funding, there are some places that if we didn't have the minimum effort, people wouldn't do anything. And so you've got to have, it's got to be a balance. It's got to be a certain amount from the state level. And a child in Estill, South Carolina deserves the same education opportunity as a child in the urban areas. Richland 1, Richland 2, Lexington districts have the same right to that education.
We're going to have, these folks are going to have the opportunity to hear a principals panel tomorrow night, and the principal of Estill High School is going to be here, as well as one of your principals from Lexington Richland 5, and from Richland 1, and from Saluda. So we're going to have an array of folks, and I'm sure some of the conversation will be around the opportunities that are provided to youngsters, and our need to, through this, you know, we always sort of forget, and here I am talking about finance at the end of this panel discussion, but it is a key piece to whether or not we can do the work that we need to do. And that three-legged stool that we talk about having some, you know, state income tax, some sales tax, and some property tax, and sort of a balance to provide for children seems to be the most logical way to make sure that we don't suffer ups and downs and are able to provide or not provide for youngsters. So how we do that and how we all advocate collectively to make sure that that's the kind of model we end up with is going to be a real challenge for us for the next several years, I think, as we work through all of these issues.
People talk about throwing money at education.
Yeah.
Nobody throws money at the Pentagon.
Only at education, isn't that
Only
true?
at education they throw money.
And what was one of the first things you learned in any of these administration courses you took? No responsibility or accountability without authority. No accountability without authority. If they eliminate physical authority from local school boards, then how can they hold them responsible for the product?
I have about 103 questions left that we obviously are not going to get to. So let me end up, we have only about 5-10 minutes maybe. Best day, worst day in the superintendency. What are those? We've talked a little bit about some of those worst days. What are the best days in the superintendency?
I love graduation. and it's not because it's the end of the year. It's because kids are so excited about the accomplishment of achieving a high school diploma. And I'm sure you see the same thing at the college level also. But I love the smiles on their faces, the shouts of joy, the exhilaration, the parents and grandparents and family from all over that come to celebrate. I mean, that's a major milestone where a child becomes an adult as far as I'm concerned. And it's one of the most significant things that they'll ever do in their life. And to see them come that far and achieve that milestone, I just love graduation.
And I've been with him on those days. He's absolutely not kidding you. He loves those days.
That's the best thing.
I can't say that. I did enjoy the accomplishments, the smiles, and all of those. But graduation just was not one of my best days or whatever. I think that probably the best experience that I had as a superintendent was getting involved with the Special Olympics, and seeing that segment or that subgroup. And even though they do sometimes now cause some problems on AYP and things like that, but to see them achieve and to see them accomplish, and then to look at the parents and things, I think that was probably, if you're talking about a best day, I think that was probably my best day that I had as a superintendent.
Best days, Walt.
I'm trying to figure that out here. I like graduation. I like the atmosphere around high schools and sports and children being involved and stuff. I think I just like I like going into schools. I like going into schools where there's a lot of where people are working together to make things happen, where there are relationships, where kids are getting along, where there's good leadership, where teachers are working as hard as they can work. Just that whole atmosphere. I'm an old high school principal. I guess I like being around high school kids. That's graduations. I don't know about graduation.
I didn't always have the same enthusiasm.
I didn't have the enthusiasm.
Can, so it was a little bit of a
Although I
challenge.
was glad to see some classes graduate. Big time.
The beach balls don't bother me. They really don't.
And the hoops and the hollows and the yells didn't used to bother either. Those. I would be willing to bet that worst days are loss of students, loss of staff.
Been involved in some tragedies. I think anytime you lose a member of the family, and that could be an employee or a student, it's just awful. But the worst that I can remember was one day when we had two sisters that were killed in an automobile wreck at the same time. And I went in with the minister to inform the parents. I hope to never have to do that again.
But the message to these folks in distance ed and here in the studio is that you will have both worst days and best days, and very often they revolve around the young people and the staff that you have, and I'm not sure that we can prepare you for dealing with those. You do those the best you can.
I wouldn't trade the last 41 years of my life for anything else I've done. And every once in a while, a youngster pick up the phone and said, I just had you on my mind. I wanted to talk to you, and that's happened to me. I wouldn't trade that. You can't take it to the BMW place. You can't take it to the Piggly Wiggly. But I wouldn't trade the last 41 years for anything anybody has done for my relationship with people and children.
I agree, Walt. It's very rewarding to, even though when you get as old as I am and you go into some of a grocery store or something like that and you see somebody and you don't have a clue as who they are. And they walk up to you and they say, well, aren't you Dr. Floyd? I said, well, yeah. And then they say, well, you were my high school principal back in so-and-so, and they have some story or something that they can tell you. And that's when it all becomes and makes it worthwhile. The things that you sacrificed for, that they talked about whenever you're there. So it makes it all worthwhile.
You have time, because they're going to close us off at 7:50, for one last piece of advice to these school administrators. Got a piece of advice that you offer to take with them on their way as they begin these careers in school administration?
Have a good time. I'm serious as I can be. And, I see some people that take on the role of administrator and immediately put on this mask, uniform, whatever, and, they become uptight, they become different, from what they were that enabled them to reach that point. Yeah, go have fun. I mean, you know, life is short. Enjoy yourself. And that, in my opinion, will carry over into your success as an administrator. Teachers and children want to know that you're real people. They really do. They want to know that you're real people. Now, make no mistake about it. When you become an administrator, you become one of them.
Not one
Instead
of
of
us.
us.
Not one of us.
Stop talking in the lounge and walk in. People get real quiet.
But that's okay. They still care about you. They still want to be a member of your family. But they also want to know that you're a real person, and they're not going to lose respect for you if you show them that you can laugh and smile and cry and just enjoy what you're doing. But bottom line is, go enjoy yourself, and if you don't enjoy it, get out of it.
Basically, I would say two things. Number one is be yourself. Don't try to copy somebody else's style or try to be somebody that you're not. Be yourself. And the second thing is, when you get into leadership, of course, we talked about you're in an area of response of authority. Authority goes with the position, but always remember that you can never demand respect. You can only earn it. And from that standpoint, and always remember that you have to earn respect in order to be trusted and build the confidence in your staff and so forth.
If this is really what you want to do, go for it. There are no lazy people doing what they enjoy doing. And work's going to kill you anyway, so you may as well enjoy it.
I want you to join me in thanking these incredible folks for giving their time tonight.
Thank you.
Y'all were absolutely wonderful.
Fun. Really have.
Well, stay right here. We have just, you get major rewards and pay and big checks for being involved in this. So on behalf of the class,
More than Pepsi, huh?
you get more than a Pepsi.
Oh, man.
You get a Pepsi and a can of chocolates.
Oh, my goodness.
All right.
Thank you so
We
much.
do
This
appreciate
is
so
wonderful.
much your being here, and thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good
Well,
friends and a wonderful evening.
thanks, Sandra Lindsay. I'll tell you what
This
now.
is the lady.
You know about her history. She's made a major contribution in South Carolina.
It has been a lot of fun and a real pleasure, and friendships all around that mean a lot and that go a long, long way and then stay around for years and years and years. So,
Forever.
thank you, folks. I've enjoyed it. I'll see you tomorrow night for the principal's panel. And it is downstairs in Amico Hall. And do your evaluations, please, because you do go online. I'll need that feedback so that we'll know who this is. This is our last class. What a way to finish. Thanks, guys.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Good luck to you.